right, everybody, welcome back. We're diving into something pretty interesting today.
Yeah.
All this back and forth on tariffs.
Right.
If you've been following this, things have been kind of crazy with these small packages coming in from China.
Absolutely. And it's really hitting a fever pitch now.
Yeah. And I think
what's so interesting about it is it's not just some,
Yeah.
political thing happening way up there,
Yeah.
in Washington.
No, this is something.
It's like every time you go online
Yeah.
and you see like, oh, shipping has gone up, or my favorite online store has suddenly changed all their rules.
Yeah, you're seeing it right there in your wallet and in your shopping cart.
Exactly.
This is one of those things where international trade policy and, all this sort of wonky stuff
Yeah.
actually trickles down and you feel it
Yeah.
really directly.
So let's rewind a little bit, I think, to understand what's going on here.
Okay.
We need to talk about this thing called the de minimis threshold.
Yeah. Now, this sounds very technical, but
It is, but we stand
it's
for...
actually pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Basically, it means there's this dollar value limit.
Yeah.
And if something you're importing is under that limit,
It gets a free pass.
it just kind of gets waved through.
You don't have to pay.
You don't have to deal with any of those.
Any duties or taxes.
Exactly. Duties and taxes, all that stuff.
It just slides right in.
And for a long time, that limit was $800.
$800. Yeah.
Which is, a significant chunk of change.
Yeah, you could get a lot of stuff for $800.
You can get a lot of stuff. And this is where it starts to get really interesting when you think about, all the stuff that we're all buying online these days.
Exactly, especially from places like China.
Oh, especially.
I mean, think about those, fast fashion websites.
Oh, yeah.
Like Shein or Temu.
Yeah.
Their entire business model is built on like
super cheap
goods coming in, and, for a long time they could just ship all that stuff under that $800 limit and consumers were happy.
And no one even thought twice about it.
Nobody even thought twice about it.
Right. And so this $800 limit, this de minimis threshold, it's been around for a while.
Yeah, it's been around since like 2016.
Yeah.
And for a while it made sense.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it really did help to simplify trade. Customs officials, they can't be inspecting every single package that comes into the country.
Right. You got to have some kind of system.
You need some kind of system. And this allowed them to focus on, those bigger shipments, the higher value things where maybe there's more risk of something shady going on.
Yeah, where it's worth their time to really...
Exactly. But then, as you alluded to earlier, we had this massive boom in e-commerce.
Oh, yeah.
And suddenly everybody's ordering everything online.
Everything.
And a lot of that stuff
From China.
is coming from China.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so all of a sudden, those small packages, they weren't so small anymore. I mean, the volume just exploded. And that's when this previously obscure little trade rule
Right.
started making headlines.
It's kind of wild to think about how something like that could just become this huge issue seemingly overnight.
Yeah, and you started seeing these stories in the news about warehouses overflowing with packages because customs was just completely overwhelmed.
I remember that. Yeah, it was a logistical nightmare.
A total nightmare. And this was something that the Biden administration was actually starting to look at back in 2023.
Even before all of this.
Yeah, even before all of this recent stuff with Trump, they were already talking about maybe we need to tighten these rules a little bit. Because they were starting to see that this $800 threshold, it wasn't really working the way it was intended.
Yeah, it sounds like they were starting to think that maybe it was giving Chinese companies a bit of an unfair advantage.
Exactly. I mean, if you can flood the market with cheap goods and you don't have to pay any taxes or duties,
Yeah.
it makes it really hard for American companies to compete.
Right. And I've even heard some people say that it could be a loophole for smuggling or counterfeit goods.
Oh, absolutely. That's another big concern.
Because it's harder to track all those small packages.
It's so much harder to track, and it's easier to kind of slip things under the radar.
So even before Trump came into the picture, there were already signs that this whole de minimis thing was ripe for a shakeup.
Absolutely. It was just a matter of time before something changed.
And then, boom,
Boom.
Trump drops this bombshell.
Yeah.
And suddenly, duty-free treatment for all these small packages is suspended.
Just like that.
It was a really bold move, and I think it caught a lot of people off guard.
Oh, yeah. Especially companies like Shein and Temu.
Oh, they must have been freaking out.
Their entire business model was built on those low prices, and suddenly they have to figure out how to deal with all these new tariffs.
Yeah.
It's a huge disruption.
And it's not just about them, right?
I
I mean,
know.
this has the potential to impact,
Absolutely.
like, the whole U.S.-China trade relationship.
This is way bigger than just a few online retailers.
Yeah, it's like
It's a signal,
Yeah.
a signal that the U.S. is serious about changing the terms of trade with China.
Yeah.
And we don't know exactly how China is going to respond, but it's definitely going to have ripple effects.
And I think for the average American consumer, this is where it starts to hit home because suddenly those cheap goods that we've all gotten used to might not be so cheap anymore.
Exactly. Those prices are going to start going up, and that could be a real shock for people who are used to getting those bargains.
And for businesses that rely on those imports.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to have to figure out.
They're going to have to either absorb those costs or pass them along to consumers.
And potentially rethink their whole supply chains.
Potentially. Yeah, it's a lot of uncertainty.
So it's like this one policy shift has the potential to trigger all these other changes.
It's like a domino effect, and it's hard to predict exactly where all those dominoes are going to fall.
And we can't forget about the political side of things either.
Oh, right.
I mean, this is Trump we're talking about.
He's not exactly known for playing it safe.
No. He likes to shake things up.
He likes to make a splash, and this is definitely a splash.
And he's not stopping there.
Oh, no.
He's talking about these reciprocal tariffs.
Right, which is basically a fancy way of saying...
Like tit for tat?
Yeah, tit for tat. You tax us, we tax you.
Exactly. So imagine if China says, okay, we're going to put a tariff on American apples.
We're going to slap a tariff right back on their smartphones.
It could escalate really quickly.
It could turn into a full-blown trade war.
So it's like a high-stakes game of chess.
Absolutely.
Where each side is trying to outmaneuver the other.
And the stakes are incredibly high because this isn't just about economics.
Right.
It's about global power and influence.
So for those of us, just browsing Amazon late at night looking for a good deal,
right.
What does all of this actually mean?
That's the million-dollar question, and that's where this whole debate about the de minimis threshold gets really interesting. Because there are strong arguments on both sides.
Yeah, let's hear them.
So, on the one hand, you have the supporters of the lower threshold.
Okay.
And they say, look, this is crucial for keeping global trade flowing smoothly.
Right.
We don't want to bog down the system with all this extra paperwork and inspections for every little thing.
Yeah, it sounds like a recipe for chaos.
It would be total chaos, and it would slow everything down, and ultimately, they argue, that would hurt consumers.
By driving up prices.
Exactly. They say if we make it more expensive and difficult to import goods, those costs are just going to get passed along to you and me.
So they're basically saying that a lower threshold is good for consumers because it helps keep prices low.
That's their argument, and it's a compelling one.
But then you have the critics who say, wait a minute.
Right.
What about American jobs?
What about American businesses and industries?
They're worried that all these cheap imports are putting American companies out of business.
Exactly. And they're not just talking about, mom and pop shops. They're talking about entire industries that could be decimated if they can't compete with those low prices.
So they're saying that a higher threshold would help protect American jobs and industries.
That's their argument. And they also raise concerns about national security.
National security.
Yeah, the idea is that if we become too reliant on China for all of our stuff, what happens if there's a conflict?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, we wouldn't be able to just switch suppliers overnight.
Exactly. It could leave us in a really vulnerable position.
And then there's the whole issue of counterfeit goods.
Right.
Which seems like it would be a lot easier to slip through if we're not inspecting as many packages.
Absolutely. That's a huge concern for both consumers and businesses.
Because who wants to end up with a fake product?
Nobody wants that. And it can be really hard to tell the difference sometimes.
So it seems like this isn't just about finding the right number for the de minimis threshold.
No, it's not.
It's about weighing all these different factors.
It's about economics and politics and national security and consumer safety.
It's a really complicated issue.
It's one of those things where there's no easy answer.
Yeah. And it seems like the conversation is just getting started.
Oh, yeah. This is going to be playing out for a long time.
Well, you've given us a lot to think about.
I hope so.
I mean, in this increasingly interconnected world,
yeah,
where do we draw the line?
That's the question.
Between, facilitating global trade
right.
and protecting our own interests.
Where's that balance?
And I think that's a question that we all need to be asking ourselves.
Absolutely.
Not just the policymakers.
Not just the people in Washington.
But all of us.
As consumers, we have a role to play in this, too.
Yeah. What are we buying? Where are we buying it from?
Those are choices that we make every day, and those choices have consequences.
So it's about being informed and being engaged.
And be mindful of the impact of our choices.
Well, on that note, I think we're going to leave it there for today.
All right.
But this is a conversation that we're going to keep having.
Absolutely.
So stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
We'll be back with more deep dives soon.
We'll see you next time.